I flew back to London from Cape Town the next night, and I remember a very lovely air stewardess looking after me. I was all over the place, just getting through lots of tissues and crying and crying. And then I thought, look, I've got to get a grip here and do something useful for Diana. And I decided the first thing that needed to be done was to find somebody to write and deliver the eulogy.
There is a man living in England who has been sitting on what might be the most significant private archive in contemporary history for nearly 30 years. Personal home videos, handwritten journals, page after page of Diana's own private thoughts, unseen photographs, raw footage of a young woman before the planet knew she existed. And across all that time, through every documentary commission, every anniversary project, every streaming deal, every network that came knocking after that August night in Paris, this man has never once opened that door. Not for fame, not for fortune, not for any of the hundreds of producers who have arrived with briefcases and proposals since September of 1997. His name is Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, Diana's younger brother, and until very recently, the wider world had largely stopped thinking about him. That silence has now cracked open. And the reason it has cracked, the reason Charles Spencer has spoken, the reason the 4 words he reportedly delivered in response to a Netflix proposal in early 2026 are echoing across every royal analysis platform on Earth, that reason goes much deeper than a rejected pitch meeting. Tonight, you are going to hear all of it. The proposal, the archive, the guilt that has quietly shaped every decision he has made since the evening before Diana's funeral, the letter he reportedly sent to Prince William, and the question almost nobody in mainstream coverage is asking directly enough. What happens now that the man guarding the gate has finally stepped into the open? Stay with me. This one has layers. Subscribe to Royal Pulse for more videos. Before anything else, who is Charles Spencer really? When did you last think about him specifically? Not Diana, not Harry, not William, just Charles Spencer. If you are being honest, most people can trace exactly one moment: Westminster Abbey, the 6th of September, 1997. A worldwide audience estimated at 2 billion people. A young man in a dark suit moving toward a lectern inside one of the most ancient churches on Earth, carrying a sheet of paper and delivering words so dense with grief and anger and love that the applause began outside in the street and moved through the stone walls like a wave. He made a promise that day, not a vague expression of sadness, a covenant. He promised that Diana's boys would be surrounded by warmth and imagination, rather than coldness and rigidity, that her blood relatives would protect them from the same institutional machinery that had, in his own words, crushed their mother. He said it while looking directly at the royal family seated in front of him. He said it with 2 billion witnesses and never wavered once. Then he returned to Northamptonshire, and that was the last moment most of the world registered his name. That long, deliberate withdrawal is precisely what makes what is unfolding now so striking, because Charles Spencer is 62 years old, the steward of a family estate that has held its land for 5 centuries, and he has spent every year since 1997 doing something almost none of the other figures connected to Diana's story have ever managed. He kept his word. Think about the media industry that has been constructed around Diana's memory. Her image on magazine covers, her dresses in glass museum cases, her voice in documentary after documentary, her likeness on stamps and bottles, and the jacket of nearly every book ever written about the modern British monarchy. An entire commercial world has been built on the foundation of one woman's tragedy, and Charles Spencer has never added a single original stone to any of it. Every Diana documentary you have ever watched was built from the same recycled footage, the same clips in rotation since the 1990s, the same photographs every archive already holds. Spencer has never offered the originals. Not once. Not to the BBC, not to ITV, not to Netflix or Amazon or any American broadcaster who came to his door across 3 decades. Now ask yourself the question almost nobody asks. Why? What would a man have to believe about protecting someone's memory to refuse that volume of money and that magnitude of public opportunity for that long? That question is the key to everything that follows, because once you understand the answer, once you understand what is genuinely behind Charles Spencer's silence, the 4 words he reportedly gave that Netflix proposal stop reading like aristocratic dismissal. They start reading like the only possible answer from a man carrying a burden most of us will never fully comprehend. The jewelry trail and the moment warmth began to turn. It began the way so many things in this family seem to begin: small, beautiful, apparently harmless. The royal wedding, May 2018. The evening reception. Meghan Markle appeared wearing Diana's aquamarine ring, that distinctive pale blue stone that anyone with casual knowledge of Diana's life would recognize in an instant. From wherever Charles Spencer was watching, it likely felt genuinely moving. Someone new, someone his nephew clearly cherished, choosing to carry Diana forward into the most important night of her own life. It felt like remembrance. It may have felt like belonging. Then came the butterfly earrings, then the Cartier tank watch, then the gold bracelets. Item after item, occasion after occasion, piece by piece. Each object that had once been Diana's surfaced on Meghan at precisely the moments when photography was not just possible, but guaranteed. High-profile events, carefully timed entrances, maximum camera coverage. Every single time. I want to be fair here. Fairness matters, and I want you to hold this carefully. Nobody can prove that the motivation behind any of these choices was anything other than sincere tribute. Grief works in strange and tender ways within families. Meghan had married into one of the most emotionally complicated dynasties in the modern world. There is a genuine and entirely human version of this story, where every one of those jewelry decisions was exactly what they appeared: a daughter-in-law honoring the memory of a woman she would never meet, but whose sons she had grown to love. Hold that version in one hand. Now hold this question in the other. When does tribute become a pattern? When does a pattern become a habit? But every single time, always timed to a guaranteed photograph? That is a choice, and the man at Althorpe was paying attention. Keep that in mind, because the jewelry was only the opening chapter. What followed is where, according to most accounts, whatever warmth existed reportedly began curdling into something considerably cooler. March 2021. You remember it, the planet remembers it, but I want you to remember it the way Charles Spencer reportedly experienced it, watching alone from the house where Diana spent her childhood. The lighting was low and golden. The atmosphere was soft, intimate, almost confessional. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one nameless establishment that had, she said, refused to acknowledge her pain, dismissed her mental health, left her entirely alone with no exit available except the one that led directly to the public. If you know Diana's story, the recognition hits like cold water, because that is almost scene for scene the structure of Diana's own 1995 Panorama conversation. Run the comparison yourself. A royal wife, isolated, speaking of a system that was deaf to her suffering. The institution had closed every door, so she went directly over its head to the public through one trusted journalist. Soft lighting, a confessional quality, the sensation of secrets finally breathing in open air. Every element rhymed. The lighting rhymed. The grammar of victimhood rhymed. The staging rhymed. One woman, one sympathetic voice, one nameless establishment. There is only one element that changed between 1995 and 2021, and it is the most revealing difference of all. Diana gave her interview while trapped inside the institution, with no clear exit and everything on the line. The 2021 version was filmed from a villa in California, after the departure, with a production team already in place and a streaming arrangement already signed. The original was a cry for help. The second version, whatever else you choose to believe about it, was a launch. And watching from the house where Diana spent her childhood, Charles Spencer reportedly did not experience that hour as a tribute. How could he? Because of what you are about to hear. Something about this man's personal history with Panorama that most royal coverage consistently avoids, and it is the key that opens every other lock. The guilt that built the vault. This is the piece of the story that mainstream royal coverage consistently avoids, and it is the key that opens every other lock. According to long-established accounts, it was Charles Spencer himself who first brought Diana into contact with Martin Bashir, the journalist responsible for that 1995 Panorama conversation. The same interview the world now knows was secured through fabricated documents and deliberate psychological manipulation. Forged bank statements, manufactured evidence of surveillance, false proof of betrayal. All of it constructed to persuade a frightened and isolated woman that everyone surrounding her was an enemy and that the only safe move available to her was to sit in front of a camera and speak her most private pain to the nation. Diana's fragility was not a coincidental feature of that broadcast. Her fragility was the product being sold. And her younger brother, by these accounts, had unknowingly held the door open. When the full truth about how that interview was engineered finally emerged years later, it reportedly struck Charles Spencer like a collapse, because it meant that he, however innocently, however unknowingly, had been part of one of the most profound exploitations of his sister's suffering that occurred during her lifetime. Consider what that does to a person. You spend your entire adult life believing you are your sister's defender. You stood in Westminster Abbey before 2 billion people and told the world you would protect her sons from the system that had damaged her. And then you discover that the single most psychologically destructive media moment of her final years walked through a door that you opened. Everything since, by every account, has been an act of reparation. The sealed archive, the refusals across decade after decade, the decision to bury Diana at Althorpe rather than surrender her resting place to any institution, the unseen home videos, the handwritten journals that nobody outside the Spencer family has ever read. He has been doing penance, making absolutely certain that nothing resembling Panorama can ever reach Diana again, even in death. Even now, even 3 decades later. And in doing so, he has preserved something remarkable, something almost no famous figure of the modern era has been given. He has protected Diana's mystery. There is a private Diana the world has never consumed, a real, unguarded, fully human version of her, and she exists only because one man has been saying no for 30 years. The pitch and the reason Charles Spencer called it a joke. Now place yourself in his chair. You have spent 28 years in reparation for one introduction. You have declined every network, every publisher, every production company, every offer. And then a courier arrives with a proposal. Let me tell you what was reportedly inside it, because once you understand the full list of what they were asking for, the response stops appearing like contempt and starts appearing like the only rational answer available to a man in his position. The pitch was a major anniversary documentary timed for 2027, 30 years since Paris, 30 years of grief, 30 years of unresolved questions, an emotional, cinematic, supposedly definitive Diana film anchored by her own son. On paper, it sounds compelling. Netflix reportedly responded warmly from the beginning. The streaming budget was described as significant. The surface intent appeared to be a tribute to Diana's memory. But here is what the production reportedly required. They wanted Althorpe itself, the childhood home, the grounds, the lake, the island. They reportedly wanted access to Diana's handwritten private journals, pages she wrote for herself alone, not for readers, not for publication. They wanted home videos never publicly released, the unfiltered, unguarded footage, the real private Diana that nobody outside the Spencer family has ever seen. Without those elements, this would be just another archive documentary assembled from the same recycled footage as every other one produced in the past 30 years. With them, it would be the defining Diana film of the century. And there was one more thing, one angle, the angle that made the pitch irresistible to the people selling it and reportedly devastating to the man receiving it. They reportedly wanted to draw a direct and explicit line between Diana's battle with the establishment and Meghan's battle with the same forces, to present Meghan Markle as the living continuation of Diana's story, the modern embodiment of the woman who refused to be silenced, Diana's legacy formally passed forward. Think about what Charles Spencer saw when he read that. He had watched the jewelry, he had watched the California interview, he had watched a documentary series in which a couple who had chosen to leave the media spotlight framed themselves explicitly as hunted by the same machine that destroyed Diana. He had watched, piece by piece, as Diana's tragedy was converted into someone else's origin story without a single conversation with Althorpe. And now they wanted the archive, the journals, the island, the originals, to crown a successor. Of course he said what he reportedly said. Honestly, the only surprise is that he kept it to 4 words. Is this a joke? Those 4 words were not old money disdain. They were not aristocratic contempt for cameras. They were 28 years of grief and guilt and reparation compressed into a single sentence. The Sussex operation, and why this particular documentary mattered so desperately. To understand why this particular project mattered so urgently to the Sussex side, you need to look honestly at the condition of their media operation in early 2026. The $100 million Netflix arrangement, the 5-year deal that had funded the California chapter, had been fraying significantly. The flagship project intended to stabilize things was the lifestyle series With Love, Meghan. Instead, it became The Crisis. The reviews arrived fast, and they were merciless. The Evening Standard awarded 4 stars, but still found opportunities to mock it along the way. The Times gave 2 stars and described it with a phrase that deserves to be remembered as surely dull. The Daily Telegraph also landed on 2 stars, calling it a self-absorbed exercise filled with lavish brunches, famous friends, and product placement. Then came The Guardian. Pay close attention here because this matters significantly. The Guardian is not a royalist paper. It has long supported reform of the monarchy and has consistently and forcefully criticized the treatment Meghan received. If any publication in British journalism was positioned to champion this series, it was The Guardian. They gave it 1 star. One of their writers suggested it might be the final project Meghan ever makes for the platform. When every corner of British media, from progressive broadsheet to enthusiastic royalist, arrives at the same conclusion, that is not a critical reception problem, that is a product problem. Now, here is the detail that clarifies everything. Their first documentary, covering their departure from royal life, remains the most watched debut release in Netflix history. That single fact is the master key to this entire situation. Their subsequent projects each landed with progressively less enthusiasm. The audience's message could not be written more plainly. The world is not interested in a lifestyle brand rooted in Montecito. The world is interested in royal wounds. The only Sussex content that has ever genuinely connected is content that trades on proximity to the crown and to Diana. Which is precisely why, when the brunch economy failed, the proposal reached for the deepest royal wound in existence. The Netflix arrangement was reportedly approaching expiry, with renewal anything but assured. The Spotify partnership had already ended. The lifestyle venture was not building the momentum required. According to royal commentator Ian Pelham-Turner, losing Netflix would represent a serious blow from which recovery would be extremely difficult. Do you see what the Diana documentary actually represented? It was not a creative passion project, it was an emergency signal, the single card in the deck guaranteed to generate a global audience because it was the only card printed with the one royal story larger than their own exit. And the man at Althorpe tore it up in 4 words. The brand audit and how Diana became unlicensed currency. Strip the emotion away for a moment and examine the assets clearly. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties and surrendered their HRS designations, they needed to construct a commercial existence on something. What they possessed was celebrity with a diminishing shelf life, and one asset more valuable than everything else combined: Diana. Her face, her myth, her martyrdom. In commercial terms, the Sussexes had been drawing on a brand without any formal license, because the actual license holder, the keeper of the archive, the controller of the estate, the owner of the originals, was a 62-year-old man in Northamptonshire, who apparently nobody in the Sussex operation had ever called. Watch how the withdrawals escalated. 2018, the aquamarine ring at the wedding reception, the first borrowing, received warmly. It felt like family. Then the butterfly earrings, the Cartier watch, the gold bracelets, each time to a guaranteed photograph. 2021, the California interview, the Panorama structure rebuilt from the ground up, Diana's template repurposed for a new era. Then the Netflix documentary series, her tragedy converted into their founding narrative, Diana as the justification, the structure, the bedrock. And finally, 2026, a request for the archive itself, the journals, the home videos, Althorpe as a filming location, the legacy formally transferred. They began by borrowing her jewelry. They ended by asking for her soul. Each withdrawal was larger than the one before, each one made without ever speaking to the account holder who holds the account. And the account holder, it turns out, has been tracking every single movement. The letter and the move nobody anticipated. Now we arrive at the part of the story that transforms everything, the development that most royal coverage has either missed entirely or buried in a footnote. Charles Spencer reportedly did not stop at rejecting the proposal. He reportedly did not make his decision in isolation. Sources connected to the palace have been quietly describing a relationship that most royal observers have been completely overlooking: the understanding between Diana's brother and Diana's eldest son. It is not a secret that Prince William has spent years privately furious about the commercialization of his mother's image. But understand William's situation. He is the future king. Every move he makes produces consequences. He cannot publicly obstruct his own brother's media projects without generating global headlines about censorship and family warfare.